Who am I? A talk with Unmani.
So this question, who am I? Of course, if you are on the spiritual path, which I presume if you're watching this or you've joined this webinar that you obviously are, it starts with this question. It's the most fundamental question. I know in my own personal experience, way before I ever heard of any kind of spiritual path, I was already asking myself, who am I? Who am I? And what the hell is going on here in this life? How did I get here? Why am I here? What am I doing here? What am I here for? It all boils down to this question of who am I? And of course, the mind wants to answer. The mind wants to come with all kinds of perfect answers to this question. And it starts with, of course, the story of me and my life, my story of my past and my future, and my timeline of how I'm moving. I'm someone moving on this timeline from the past into the future. And what I have endured in the past, the wounds, the traumas, the beauty and the suffering, and what I hope to achieve into the future, my goals, my fears, this whole timeline of me. So the thoughts start to answer like that. And then maybe at a certain point we question this and we say, well, actually, I'm not this story. I know for me, it became even more obvious when I heard myself in social situations telling my story of what I was doing, where I came from, what I like, what I don't like. And it started to feel more and more painful because it felt so obvious that I am not just the story that I tell. I'm not the me that I'm talking about. I'm not a collection of experiences or events, hopes and fears and dreams. I'm not that. I'm so much more. But then if the mind starts to look for what is this much more, then, okay, we go on to spiritual concepts. We hear that I am not my body. And yet it's very confusing because the body is still here. And the experience is, it seems, of looking out of these eyes as if I'm inside this body and I'm looking out. And then we pick up other spiritual concepts. I am consciousness, I am oneness, I am wholeness. And of course, these are all true, but when we pick them up just as concepts, then they're just another story, another beautiful story, but still a story. So we can change the story from a more mundane story to a more special spiritual story, but it's still the story of me. So if we don't refer to the thinking, so the thinking wants to answer this question, and everything that the thinking comes with is another story. It's another story of me. And I am not that, and I'm not that, and I'm not that. Whatever story whatever concept the thinking comes with, I'm continually not that. So then if we don't refer to the thinking, because we know I'm not that, and I'm not that, and I'm not that, then the question is, well, who am I then? If I'm not all these stories, how do I know the answer to this question? And the problem with this question is that it's a bit of a trick question, because usually we are assuming that with any answer that there, with any question that there should be an answer. And with this question, there isn't an answer in the way that we usually assume that there is. There isn't an answer in the thinking, in a concept, in an idea about me. Because if there was, you would be then limited to this particular story, this particular concept, which would feel very limiting. And that's the problem with every story that we tell about me, is that it feels limited. I'm not just this, I'm also this, and this, and this, and this. I'm unlimited, in fact. But as soon as we start to speak about who I am really, every word can be taken as another story, another concept. So really, this question cannot be answered by the thinking. It simply cannot be. And how do we then not refer to the thinking answer when we ask this question? We may notice that thinking comes with potential answers, but we don't refer to them. We say, thank you very much, thinking. I really appreciate all your answers, all your efforts, but I'm not referring to you right now. I want to check what is really true beyond all these thoughts and concepts and stories. So then the thinking can go blah, 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 blah. And yet there's a waiting, a receptivity, an openness, a not knowing. Not knowing in thinking. And at first, nothing happens. There can even be more confusion in the thinking. Perhaps if you had some hope that something special would happen with this question, especially when we hear about great masters who ask this question and then suddenly they had this amazing experience of awakening, everything changed. So if you have an expectation like that, let's not refer to that either, because that's also a thought, a belief. We just stay with the ordinary experience, with this question. Who am I? When I don't refer to my thoughts. Nothing. I mean, even that word nothing, right? It's not that. Every word is wrong. Every word that I've put in that gap is not it. So we could stay silent, but it's not even the experience of silence. The best I can do really is to say what it's not. So we keep stripping away whatever a thought wants to put in that gap. As soon as it tries, we say, no, it's not that. It's an endless free-falling in not knowing, in not understanding, in not limiting who I am. a gap. And nothing needs to fill it. And this is who you are. Nothing needs to fill this gap, because this gap is enough. This gap is who you are. We hear metaphors like the blank screen on which it all happens. And this is a beautiful metaphor. Of course, when the mind gets hold of it, turns it into some imagination, which is not that. But it is the blank, the emptiness, the nothingness. No answer to this question. And of course, the mind goes on trying to fill the gap. Whether it's the mind or whether it's also even sensations. There can be all kinds of sensations that come up in that gap. And they change and they change. And you notice it all. But still, the gap is unfilled. Open. An endless opening. Boundless. This question, who am I, is a support in a way, a lifeline from Ramana Maharshi or other teachers, masters who recommend that you ask this question. Because there is really no way to help spiritual seekers when they long to wake up to who they are. The best that we can say is ask yourself who you are, because this gets to the root of it. This gets to the core of it. But most of the time, this question is taken to be a practice that you should practice. That people assume that in order to wake up or be free or come to some perfect spiritual experience, that you need to ask yourself this question of who am I, again and again. And perhaps each time you ask that question, you might have an experience where the thinking quietens down, maybe in a sense of expansion. But this question as a practice can become just like any practice that generates a beautiful experience. But then when you don't practice this, the experience passes. And I know many spiritual seekers have become almost addicted to asking this question. And essentially, this question is not meant to be asked even more than once. If you ask it most sincerely and authentically, you only ever need to really ask once. Maybe you ask again 2-3 more times just to double check. But it's not meant to be a practice. It's not meant to be a way of soothing yourself in an uncomfortable experience. Not meant to be a way of changing an uncomfortable experience to a more pleasant one. It's about getting to who you are beyond all experience. Acknowledging that there is no answer to this question. And yet there is a knowing in not knowing. And this knowing, this is what I've been saying is the gap, it's the emptiness from which it is all seen. All known. But this can't be understood or grasped by the mind. The best that the mind can do is say, I don't know.